When it comes to making a good D&D character, one question can either paralyze or energize a player of the world's greatest role-playing game. What's your story? There's not necessarily a lot of advice on how to build a backstory that will give you something to say when this question is asked, and there's even less advice for a DM on how to mine a backstory for plot hooks to elevate their gameplay. Welcome to the channel. My name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim, and I'm a professional dungeon master running over 300 games of Dungeons & Dragons every year, up to 8 games a week sometimes. I see an awful lot of backstories, and today we're going to go through a couple that were submitted by our subscribers here on YouTube. I'll try and point out the good sides and the bad sides from both the perspective of a DM hoping to integrate that story into the game and as a player hoping to get the most out of what you've just written. Let's start with Raefon Shipsails, submitted by Spencer, who utilized this backstory in order to create a character for a Storm King's Thunder campaign a while back when he first got back into the hobby. This is Raefon's story. Raised by her shipbuilder father and loving mother outside Tulmeen on the Tethir Peninsula, she had a good childhood, though was a bit of an ugly duckling. She even learned some of the craft of shipbuilding from her father. When she was 13, her father had an accident and mother disappeared. Foul play was suspected even by Mayor Joss Knightson, but never confirmed, leaving Raefon orphaned and with no immediate family that she knew well enough to trust. For 2 years, the Shipmakers Guild sheltered her. Using the abilities that her father gave her, she did what little she could to pay her way, but ultimately she decided to travel north. She was alone, but seeking greater opportunity, adventure, and riches than the village of Tulmeen could offer. A few miles away from Tulmeen, she met a far-traveler cleric wearing a silver mask from Nimbrel, who taught her of the dead god Lyra. Something at the moment she heard the god's name clicked in her mind. Since then, she prays every night with a full moon to the goddess. She had no one to watch over her or to provide for her, so she learned to provide for herself, foraging and hunting when the need arose. She survived despite all odds and did so through cunning, speed, and dexterity. Her first stop was in Moran, where she was found in a tavern taking bets that she could outfight another woman. She got good at fighting and went toe-to-toe with most men as well. Still not feeling this was all she could accomplish and having substantial money, after spending 2 years in Moran, she decided to move north again. At this point, regardless of the fighting, became an entirely gorgeous woman. She was the center of attention in most taverns and halls, and never paid for her drinks. Somehow, she always found a way to slink away, leaving men clueless as to how she had disappeared without anyone noticing her. In the small Teeth Mountains above Moran, she was victim to an attempted mugging on the roadway, but fought the assailants off. Deciding she was not worth the trouble, they departed quickly. Suspecting they had more in mind than just stealing her goods, the decision to stay into the woods where she could not be so easily seen and avoid confrontation was a simple one. Traveling the Sword Coast, she gained a respect for common people of the Forgotten Realms. If she was able, she took on jobs and bounties to help in villages that were beset with trouble. Having seen the evil in the world firsthand, she saw the good that people could do for each other in dire circumstances too. She truly gained a love for common people. As she traveled, she gleaned as much information as possible about the world from scholars, historians, and wizards alike. Even while in Baldur's Gate, she learned much of the Halls of Wonder. There, she met someone who introduced her to the Thieves Guild by helping him steal an artifact. She did many tasks for the Thieves Guild, but will deny any involvement. She learned to persuade others to aid her or give her work for pay. If that didn't work, she would trade items from the upper-class population to supplement her income. Having carried a sword since leaving Moran, but not truly being trained with any weapons, Alatos Thubild, leader of the Thieves Guild, feeling he needed to make repayment for her deeds, referred her to a past soldier in the Thieves Guild who taught her how to use her weapons and many others. Now 24 years of age and having grown and changed considerably in many ways with the influence of the city, she became tired of the city life and sought out a different kind of adventure and solitude. She boarded a caravel as a passenger, but persuaded the captain to discount the fees in return for her help aboard the ship. After almost 45 days and several stops on the islands of the Sea of Swords, the ship arrived in Waterdeep. She decided to set up a home to the northwest of Waterdeep, on the coast of the Sword Mountains. Her home is far enough from any real human establishment, giving the option to keep to herself. Her nearest neighbor is a small furbolg colony. She met Eriu, an unusually characteristic female furbolg, while building her home. They quickly became loyal friends, and Eriu still checks on her home now that Raefon is traveling again. It's quite a story, and from a DM's perspective, there's a number of things that stand out as opportunities. Though for some reason it seems like adventurers are allergic to happy backstories as far as their childhood is concerned, the intrigue surrounding Raefon's parents' disappearance is, of course, a hook that could be developed further into a story worth checking out. As another opportunity, a statement of faith in this backstory means that you have a deity that you can involve in the story. Lyra is a Forgotten Realms goddess of illusion and trickery that has been assumed to be dead for a significant period of time, though it has been confirmed in recent lore that she is indeed alive and active again. Subtle signs that Lyra might be interested in the adventures of Raefon are a great way to give narrative plot hooks or role-playing opportunities. Putting subtle scenes into long rests that Spencer is taking a part of could allow your watch schedule to become an interesting opportunity for small hints and reveals to be slipped into the story. With Lyra being a goddess of deception, it would probably delight her if these subtle hints had multiple meanings possible, and Raefon could be left trying to figure out what the correct interpretation is on a consistent basis, giving Spencer an opportunity for a little bit more depth in his roleplay. The mysterious someone in Baldur's Gate is another opportunity for a plot hook. Detailing out who that might be could, of course, lead to interesting things, but pretty much nobody walks away from stealing an artifact in Baldur's Gate without some kind of story that follows them. Whether that's the someone trying to find Raefon for another job with raised stakes, or it's the person who had something stolen from them that's trying to find the someone and has tracked down that Raefon was involved, you've got lots of story potential for Raefon's past to catch up to them in the current timeline. And finally, as an opportunity, keep in mind that because Raefon has established that she has a home base, you have a home base that can draw interest too. Whether this is a message sent from her furball companion that tells her of trouble in her home location, or any other kind of inference that is going to draw attention back there, or even just a cool couple of pieces of loot that only serve the purpose of decorating your home base. There is, however, one fairly major challenge in this particular backstory from the DM's perspective, and that's in a section of this long backstory that I actually snipped out, which is the story of her new beginning as an adventurer on her way to Nightstone as part of the Storm King's Thunder campaign. The problem with this is that Nightstone is the first level introduction into Storm King's Thunder, meaning that Raefon, who has led a fighting ring, stolen an artifact, worked for a thieves guild until the guild leader was so indebted to her that he offered her multi-class training, and even retired to her own home in the wilderness. All this before she reaches the vaunted heights of first level. This is a fairly common issue with backstories, and one of the reasons why there are a lot of people out there giving advice to not create a backstory for your character. Ultimately, some degree of reining this story back in to make it more appropriate to a first level character, or saving this story for a character who's a little further along their journey, might be necessary in order to match the themes and story of the campaign with the themes and story of the character. From a player's perspective, there are a couple of opportunities in Spencer's backstory. The first to me is that Raefon has a very specific faith, and that it ties into the lore that's already established for that campaign setting. Delving into the dogma of Lyra and finding opportunities to add her influence into the story and into your decisions will do wonders for this character. The second is because you've already established a lot of the ways that Raefon interacts with the world, you have a clear guide already telling you how you should attempt to interact with the world once play starts. She'll try to use her looks to get what she wants, or to get it cheaper. She'll sneak out and steal if she doesn't have the option to persuade and convince. And she'll pull up stakes and move on if things ever get to a point where she's bored. That said, from the player's perspective, there's also a number of challenges. The first actually ties to the last of your opportunities. Because you know a lot about how Raefon interacts with the world, you're going to be tempted tempted to have her interact in that same manner, but now you're going to be beholden to dice and modifiers as to whether or not you're successful. A bad die roll or two, and for the entire campaign she might find herself completely unable to swindle even a random commoner in the bar out of a decent drink, which would be a bit of a contrast from the legend that she's built up for herself in your story. The second is that although she has the most important portion of any motivation to go out on an adventure, just a desire to do so, she doesn't have any other real goal or challenges to drive her interactions. Her previous story threads, at least from her perspective, appear to be already complete. Adjusting one or two of these past situations so that they weren't quite so tidily wrapped up would allow her to have something to drive her choices moving forward. If she was following the trail of her parents' disappearance, had left the Thieves Guild despite an outstanding marker, or if her success in the fighting ring earned her a powerful enemy that she had to avoid. Giving her an unresolved conflict not only gives the DM a hook to hang the story on, but it also gives you something to use as a lens for your roleplay, so that you can ask a question like, if I was on the run from a Baldur's Gate Thieves Guild, how would I respond to this? Thanks, Spencer, for your submission. Our next story was submitted by Joe Oak, who gave us the story of Mork the Damned. The best and worst day of Mork's life was the day he predicted his own death. You would think that a half-orc who fears death would never do such a thing. But the dream of adventure was greater, because if there's one secret Mork now knows about his doomed fate, it's that one day he will die, but that day isn't today. From a DM's perspective, there's a number of opportunities in this story. A prediction of doom is an awesome thread that can be tugged on and teased for a lot of story. What was the fate that Mork saw? And where's Mindy? Comment below if you caught that reference. Knowing what it is, you can put situations into your campaign that hit on these notes or far afield from it, and give Mork a reason to alternate between feelings of utter invulnerability, "Ha! I die in a fire, and we're in the middle of a blizzard in Icewind Dale," and terror. "You want me to purposefully go to the elemental plane of fire? Are you kidding me?" Also, being a self-predictor of his own death, Mork has some divinatory talent. Given that we don't necessarily have a lot of specific rules for that kind of thing, there's a lot of opportunity for us to build a lot of other visions and predictions for Mork to make over time. Perhaps he'll see the fate of all of his companions, or of the storyline that you're presenting. A talent like that is one that a DM can use over and over again, allowing you to provide hints, clues, quests, and roleplay opportunities. However, Mork's story does offer some challenges for the DM as well. Being a blank slate outside of this one specific note means that that's the only thing that you can effectively use from Mork's past to build a story around in Mork's present and future. As written, with Mork's fate unknown, there's no major continuity problem that can arise if he does happen to fall in combat at some point in your game sessions. However, at that same point, he has nothing to hang his roleplay on as to whether or not he should be afraid or excited about the confrontation. If we learn what his fate is, though, we do have to think about how he could reach that fate if he were to fall somewhere else and to some other circumstance. Because, hopefully, we don't plan on killing him or any of our other characters at the table on purpose. It will happen outside of our control, and we need to give some thought to how we can fail forward towards his established destiny if he should die to something completely random or unrelated. In fact, it's particularly unlikely that he is going to die according to the circumstance that we detail for him or that he details to us, unless we're putting him in that situation over and over again. From the player's perspective, Mork's greatest opportunity is the fact that he has a built-in desire to adventure and experience things, and has a reason not to be afraid to go and do things that other people wouldn't necessarily be willing to do. This is the easiest hook and the easiest way to get Mork motivated into the next action. However, from a challenges standpoint, because Mork lacks a definitive vision as to how he dies, he lacks the depth that could come from knowing what his fate is and trying to subvert it for as long as possible. as well as encouragement to not only roleplay fearlessness, but to alternate between being fearless and being afraid. Mort also has motivation to adventure, but he doesn't have any specific motivations of his own to pursue, leaving him in a reactive state to whatever story the DM is presenting, but not having anything that's just of his own interest for him to try and track down and learn more about. For many DMs and many campaigns, that's actually going to be perfect, but from other campaigns, it's going to leave you on the sidelines of other people's story more often than you might prefer. It can be a challenge to be as invested when the entire story is just not necessarily involving you the same way it will if your DM has a chance to build your story into the story. Mork also doesn't have any readily prepared answers for the common questions that he's likely to see in play. Who are you? Where do you come from? And where have you been all my life? Without those basic details, Mork is forced into an improvisation prompt every time somebody wants to know anything about him except how he dies. And possibly, if we take it just as written, that too. Thanks, Joe, for submitting this one. I hope this is useful to you. A big thanks to Chris Davis for submitting this next story for us to review. Aquilis Herschel, apparently named after a German-British astronomer who discovered infrared radiation and one of the moons of Saturn. Aquilis was born into the influential Herschel family in the bustling city of Neverwinter. The Herschels were not only nobles, but also key members of the Covenant, an alliance of mages dedicated to maintaining peace in the northern realms of Faerun and preparing for potential conflicts with the orcs of the north. Growing up, Aquilis was immersed in a world where politics, magic, and diplomacy intertwined. As a young heir, Aquilis showed a natural affinity for magic and diplomacy. He was groomed to play a significant role in the Covenant, learning the intricacies of magical theory and the delicate art of political negotiation. His early life was marked by luxury, intellectual pursuit, and a deep sense of duty to the greater good of Faerun. However, this idyllic existence was shattered when a devastating scandal struck the Herschel family. A high-ranking member of the family was falsely accused of treachery, plotting against the city and colluding with orcish warlords. Despite their innocence, the accusation was a political maneuver orchestrated by rivals, both within the Covenant and among Neverwinter's elite, who sought to undermine the Herschel's influence. Stripped of their titles and shunned by society, the Herschel family faced ruin. Their estate was seized, their wealth frozen, and their status as Covenant members revoked. Amidst this turmoil, Aquilis's parents perished under mysterious circumstances, rumored to be an assassination. The young Aquilis, barely in his 20s, was forced to flee for his life. He found refuge in the ruins of an ancestral property hidden in the outskirts of Neverwinter. There, among the rubble and remnants of his family's legacy, he discovered an ancient tome of arcane knowledge. This tome, a relic of the Covenant's early days, contained powerful spells and secrets of the arcane. Aquilis devoted himself to mastering its contents, driven by a desire to reclaim his family's honor and expose the truth behind their downfall. Years passed, and Aquilis emerged as a formidable wizard. His quest for knowledge led him to uncover evidence of the conspiracy against his family. He realized that his family's downfall was not just a political play, but part of a larger, darker scheme threatening the stability of the Northern Realms. Now, Aquilis is a man on a mission. He seeks to clear his family's name, restore their position within the Covenant, and thwart the looming threats over Neverwinter and beyond. His journey is fraught with danger, intrigue, and the shadows of a past that continues to haunt him. Yet, he remains determined, using his arcane prowess and newfound wisdom to navigate a path towards justice and redemption. Aquilis' story has a number of great DM opportunities. Because it's tied to some campaign-setting lore and takes a few creative liberties to build upon it, the Covenant and factions both within it and surrounding it become easy to build influences upon your story, as the two or more sides try to block or support Aquilis' search for the truth. I'd probably start with both the loyalists who think Aquilis is a traitor and the traitors who know that he isn't, working against him in his quest. I'd let him over time woo the loyalists into his camp so that he could have eventually a final confrontation against the traitors who destroyed his family. Another opportunity is this arcane tome of ancient knowledge, particularly if you restrict spells that players are allowed to select so that they don't come from absolutely every source available, but you have a source yourself. This can be a great way to allow Aquilis to get some additional power in terms of flexibility as new spells are made available to him, either from those books or through homebrew of your own, as he unlocks the secrets of this book deeper and deeper over time. There might be other knowledge in this book as well, things written in ciphers or codes that will help him on his quest if only he can find the resources that will allow him to unravel them. It can even be an opportunity for fireside scene prompts, as he translates another passage from the book and is left to ponder the wisdom that it's trying to impart to him. Finally, Aquilis' story includes a lot of open ground for us to build different things that he could have feelings of attachment to. The home base of his ancestral property and the many surviving relatives that have been disgraced but likely still reside in or around Neverwinter make for an easy cast of NPCs and locations for you to build on. You can hang a lot of weight on a story hook when it comes with something along the lines of, you recognize this footman as having served your father in the past. It quickly establishes NPC credibility and importance in the eyes of this player. There are, of course, challenges as well. Aquilis' story is a big story, and it will take some building if he is going to take his story all the way from its beginnings here to the natural conclusion. You might not want that amount of side quest on the story that you already had planned. You could literally build an entire campaign around this story after all. But if you're not looking to tell that story, but your player has submitted it to you, with such a definitive life goal on the line, it could be challenging to tell the player that it won't be part of the scope of the adventure without ruining their hopes and dreams of the story that they're trying to tell. Another challenge is that because this is tied into the world lore of the setting as already imagined, there's a long history there of changes. The Covenant, for instance, occurred during the early 10th century of Forgotten Realms history, but then popped up again in more recent years. As a DM, you might not be aware of that entire story, might not have read the books that were surrounding it, and might have a different vision for how the Covenant interacts with the world. The when of your story in the campaign setting is also going to impact the state of the Covenant at that particular time. If you're planning on setting your story in the 1200s when the Covenant hadn't been reformed yet, then this could get kind of awkward. If, of course, you're trying to stay true to canon. From a player perspective, Aquilis is rife with opportunities as well. He has an awesome story with absolutely automatic built-in motivation that is going to help him to drive every interaction towards the goal that he has set his life upon. If the DM is down to tell this story, you can make your road to redemption a part of almost everything that you do. There are, however, still a couple of challenges. In the story, Aquilis emerged having mastered the tome of knowledge that he had discovered at his ancestral estate. This could be a hard thing to say if you're starting your campaign at 1st or 3rd level, unless, of course, it was a pretty wussy tome. Adjusting this to be more of an ongoing wrestle and giving Aquilis somewhere to grow and a resource for doing so makes it a more potent hook for the DM to be able to hang story on and a more realistic and usable story for Aquilis' growth. It also gives him a reason why he left study time and started adventure time, and allows him to be of any level necessary for the story. It's also notable that Aquilis doesn't have any specific NPCs detailed off the bat that are important to him. There's a lot of opportunity for the DM to create these, but giving 1 or 2 small interactions with surviving members of the family would be a great way to give Aquilis someone to refer to in stories of his own, as well as giving the DM something to hook their story onto. This final story was submitted by one of my players, Charlie, who's currently 100 sessions or so deep into a level 1 through 20 homebrew campaign. He said, "I've been thinking about a character for our next campaign that's a witch. Think Kiki's Delivery Service. Broom, big wide brim hat, cauldron, the works. I want her motivation in the story to not be as tragic as my current character. I was thinking that maybe she currently has a potions shop with her friend, and she's adventuring because she wants to go find the best ingredients to make new potions. When she goes out into the world, she collects all sorts of things for potions, even more ephemeral and random things like the glint of a dragon's eye or bottling an eerie mist in a graveyard. In the game, I'd like her to be a character that makes cool one-use magic items for herself and the party. Maybe the theme is that she's testing her product. And in downtime scenes, I want to be able to barter with customers every once in a while and use that as a representation of how sales are going for that period. It'd be cool to see her grow from a small shopkeeper to a businesswoman magnate. I like the idea of trade deals with nobles in return for influence, and plot hooks about tracking down missing goods with the Thieves Guild. As far as personality, I'm sure I'd have to get to know the character, but I was thinking that she'd be passionate and eager, but a little immature compared to where she needs to be the best shopkeeper around. But she's all big goals and big dreams, and she'll learn how to make them reality along the way. Mechanically, I was thinking Alchemist Artificer might work, but Warlock seems fun too, or maybe Lunar Sorcerer? To be honest, building characters isn't my strong suit. This fourth style of story is a great example of a character in embryo, and as an opportunity for the DM, it ranks amongst one of my favorite. If you get the opportunity, jump on this kind of collaborative creation. Charlie's character concept includes opportunities for collection quests, bartering scenes, and one-use potions that may or may not work as intended. This backstory has tons of fun hooks built in and ready to go that will delight this specific player, but can be easily tweaked to involve everybody at the table. Also, having a shop as a home base, but having a partner to justify the costs and upkeep leaves lots of opportunities for complications and story to emerge around events related to the shop, without it necessarily overwhelming the need for your player to continue going out and adventuring in order to earn money. Simply put, the shop should never become more successful than going out and gathering the next treasure hoard. But having it there as an opportunity to push you towards the next treasure hoard and to increase the value that you get for the defeat of the creatures or the visiting of the locations is a premium opportunity. Of course, there are challenges too. Working with a player to create their backstory can be a lot of work. On top of creating the premise for the story and preparing everything else, this might feel like one more thing and might even feel like it should be the player's responsibility. Because Charlie has a lot of great ideas for interactions, one-use magic items, and collection quests, this backstory might be more game time intensive than many others. If that fits with your campaign style, you're in a good place. But if it clashes with the themes of your adventure, it will be harder to back it off and find balance. Fortunately, because the idea is just in embryo stage, you've got the opportunity to work with it to find that middle ground. Finally, though you can limit this player to the experimentation on the tables in the Alchemist Artificer subclass, they won't feel fully supported and the ideas won't feel quite as fully realized unless you provide them with some essentially homebrew opportunities. I feel like this concept would stack well on top of my core item traits from my magic item creation video, but regardless, if you allow this concept, you're going to be needing to do some work in order for your player to feel it the way that they want to. From a player perspective, one of the best opportunities that I see in this is the clear hope for a transformation over time and deciding what that transformation is. This will give you insight on how to play your character throughout their journey and how to view the world. And an obvious challenge is the uncertainty about how you're going to mechanically represent this idea that you have forming between you and your DM. Mechanics can be tough to match to a concept, especially a concept like this that goes a little bit outside of the established rule set and into the point where homebrew would be helpful. For your specific story, Charlie, the Alchemist Artificer definitely seems the most on brand, but you'd be amazed at how many different options there actually are to pull this off, because it's going to rely to some degree on some homebrew from your DM, and it involves another NPC who could take the burden of the creation off of your hands. Ultimately, you should make this character using whatever set of rules seems like it will be fun for you to play most. I feel like this set of backgrounds we were given so perfectly identified some of the most common paths that people take when they're creating their backstories and the reason why guidance and workshopping is important. We had one backstory that went perhaps above and beyond what was necessary and ended up becoming the story of somebody that didn't necessarily fit a first level start into a campaign. We had another backstory that was short, sweet, to the point, but lacked the depth that would allow it to be a role-playing prompt that could be consistently used at the table. Another that fell somewhere in between the two, but we still were able to see opportunities for improvement. And then finally, a backstory in embryo begging to be developed into one of the former elements. If this was helpful and you have a backstory that you'd like to see pulled apart in a future video like this one, then please leave a comment down below that tells me that you're sending it, and send it to my email address at timothy@dmtimothy.com, and I'll see about doing this again sometime. In the meantime, according to YouTube, this video is supposedly the one that you need to watch next. Thanks so much for watching, and happy adventuring.